Welcome to Wisdom Trek with Gramps. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, and we are on day 2443 of our trek. The purpose of Wisdom Trek is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, and to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. In today's Wisdom Nugget, I'll guide you through the vast landscapes of biblical wisdom. Today we're continuing our journey through Psalm 18, and we'll be focusing on verses 16 through 24 from the New Living Translation. David reflects on God's deliverance, righteousness, and faithfulness in these verses. They offer us valuable insights into the character of God and the way that He interacts with those who love and obey Him. So let's embark on our trek together, uncovering the timeless wisdom contained in these powerful words. Psalm chapter 18, verses 16 through 24. He reached down from heaven and rescued me. He drew me out of the deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemies, from those who hated me and were too strong for me. They attacked me at the moment when I was in distress, but the Lord supported me. He led me into the place of safety. He rescued me because He delights in me. The Lord rewarded me for doing right. He restored me because of my innocence. For I have kept the ways of the Lord. I have not turned from my God to follow evil. I have followed all the regulations. I have never abandoned His decrees. I am blameless before God. I have kept myself from sin. The Lord rewarded me for doing what is right. He has seen my innocence. Let's begin with verses 16 through 18. David writes, He reached down from the heavens and rescued me. He drew me out of the deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemies, for those who hated me and were too strong for me. They attacked me at the moment when I was in distress, but the Lord supported me. In these verses, we see a vivid depiction of God's intervention into David's life. The imagery as being drawn out of the deep waters suggests a situation of overwhelming danger and helplessness. David acknowledges that his enemies were too strong for him, but it was God who rescued him. This rescue wasn't a casual or distant act. God reached down from heaven. This personal involvement shows that God's deep care and commitment for those who trust Him. David's enemies attacked him while he was most vulnerable. At the moment when I was in distress, he said. But even in his weakened state, David found strength in the Lord's support. This is a powerful reminder that no matter how desperate our situation may seem, God is always present to support us and deliver us. Moving on to verse 19, David writes, He led me to the place of safety. He rescued me because He delights in me. This verse is incredibly encouraging. David recognizes that God's deliverance wasn't just an act of duty, it was motivated by delight. God takes pleasure in rescuing and protecting those He loves. This idea of God delighting in us is a profound one. Often we think of God's actions as driven by His righteousness or His justice, which they are, but here David emphasizes God's delight. This is not a delight of detached deity, but a loving Father who cares deeply for His children. God's delight in us leads us to our safety and well-being. In verses 20 through 23, we continue the theme of God's reward. The Lord rewarded me for doing what is right. He restored me because of my innocence. For I have kept the way of the Lord. I have not turned from my God to follow evil. I have followed all His regulations. I have never abandoned His decrees. I am blameless before God. I have kept myself from sin. The Lord rewarded me for doing what is right. He has seen my innocence. In these verses, David reflects on his own righteousness and integrity. He speaks of being rewarded by God for doing what is right and maintaining his innocence. David's words reveal a heart that is committed to living according to God's ways. David's claim to righteousness might seem bold, but it is essential to understand the context. He is not claiming to be sinless in an absolute sense. Instead, he is declaring his faithfulness to God's covenant. David has made it his aim to follow God's command and to live in the way that pleases Him. He is describing the kind of life that seeks to honor God in every action and decision. This passage challenges us to examine our own lives. Are we like David, striving to keep the ways of the Lord? Are we committed to following the regulations and decrees? David's life wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, as we all do. But his heart was devoted to God, and he sought to live in a way that was blameless before Him. David's reward for his righteousness wasn't just a matter of divine obligation, it was a reflection of God's character. God honors those who honor Him. He rewards those who seek to live in obedience to His word. And just as David experienced restoration and blessing because he was committed to his righteousness, we too can trust in God that He sees our efforts and will reward our faithfulness. David's testimony in these verses underscores the relationship between obedience and blessings. When we align our lives with God's command, we position ourselves to receive His blessings. This doesn't mean that life will be free from challenges. David's life certainly wasn't. But it does mean that God will walk with us, support us, and ultimately reward us for our efforts to live righteously. It's also important to note that David's righteousness was not self-generated. God's grace empowered his ability to keep God's command and to live blamelessly. This reminds us that we, too, need to rely on God's grace and strength to live in a way that honors Him. Reflecting on these verses, we should be encouraged to pursue righteousness with all of our hearts. Our obedience to God is not in vain. He sees our efforts, He knows our hearts, and He blesses those who seek to walk in His ways. In the final verse 24 of our passage, David emphasizes that the Lord rewarded me for doing what is right. He has seen my innocence. David's confidence in God's faithfulness is evident here. He knows that God is just and will always act in accordance to His character. This verse reminds us that God is not blind to our struggle or our efforts. He sees everything that we go through and everything that we do. God takes notice when we choose to live in righteousness, even when it is difficult. In His perfect timing, He rewards our faithfulness. David's words also encourage us to trust in God's judgment. Sometimes it might seem like our efforts go unnoticed or unappreciated, but God sees the bigger picture. He knows the right time to reward us, and His rewards are always worth the wait. So how can we apply these lessons in Psalm chapter 18, verses 16-24 in our own lives? Here are a few key takeaways. First, trust in God's deliverance. Just as God reached out to rescue David, He is ready to rescue us in our time of needs. We can trust that He will support us even when we feel overwhelmed by life's challenges. Second, delight in God's delight. Remember that God delights in you. He doesn't just tolerate you, He takes pleasure in you. Let this truth encourage you to seek His protection and guidance with confidence. Third, pursue righteousness. David's commitment to living according to God's ways was the foundation of his relationship with God. Make it your aim to live in a way that honors God, knowing that He sees your efforts and will reward you in due time. Fourth, rely on God's grace. Recognize that your own ability to live righteously comes from God's grace. Depend on His strength to help you to follow His commands and to keep yourself from sin. And fifth, trust in God's faithfulness. God is faithful to reward those who seek to live in obedience to Him. Trust that He sees your heart and will bless you for your faithfulness. And as we wrap up today's episode of Wisdom Trek, let's take these lessons of Psalm 18 to heart. Trust in God's deliverance, delight in His love for you, pursue righteousness with all your heart, rely on His grace, and trust in His faithfulness. These truths will guide you in your journey of faith and bring you closer to the heart of God. Thank you for joining me on today's Wisdom Trek. It's always a privilege to explore the depths of God's Word with you. As you continue on your trek through life, remember God is with you every step of the way, supporting, guiding, and delighting in you. Until the next time, keep seeking God's wisdom, cherish each moment, and continue to make a positive impact on the world around you. And if you found this podcast insightful, please subscribe and leave us a review. Then encourage your friends and family to join us and come along with us tomorrow for another day of Wisdom Trek, creating a legacy. Thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, your mentor, and most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through the Wisdom Trek podcast and journal. As we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward, enjoy your journey, and create a great day every day. See you next time for more daily wisdom.